Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify social media and marketing for chiropractors. In today's episode, I'm going to talk all about the importance of story, the importance of your story, what's sometimes known as your origin story or your creation story. Now, right back in episode 183, I introduced you to the 7 brand messages. And in that episode, I gave you a summary of Patrick Hanlon's book called Primal Branding. It's a great book. It's probably, like many books, about 100 pages too long. So unless you're really obsessed about marketing and branding, just go back and listen to episode 183. Now, brand message number 3, Hanlon talks about the importance of sharing a creation story, sometimes known as a background story or an origin story as well. Now, here's why it's important that you do that. When you share your background story, why you do what you do there too, it brings context and meaning. Now, think about this for a moment. Think about any of the big blockbuster movies, maybe from Batman through to Harry Potter. I'm talking a little bit about Harry Potter at the moment because, as I mentioned, I think in the last episode, my gorgeous wife Lauren and I just finished watching through the whole sort of Harry Potter movies there too. But the background story for Bruce Wayne is he had a night at the cinema, movies, theatre, I think it was, with his parents. They exit through the side alley and he watched his parents get killed by a mugger. Now that's what drove his desire to be Batman, his need for justice. Harry Potter, his parents were murdered by Voldemort, and the love of his mother is what prevented Voldemort from actually killing him. Now, the background story of both of these brings context to these main characters. If we didn't understand these background stories, the rest of the movie wouldn't quite have the meaning that they have in them. Now, it's not just superhero stories that we have a background and origin story. I recently watched Happy Gilmore. Now, in the beginning of the movie Happy Gilmore, the main character, Happy, Adam Sandler, we get to find out about his love for ice skating, and particularly it was something that he shared with his father. It was a bond between the two of them. That he was terrible at it though, other than he had this incredible ability to be able to hit the puck really hard. We then go and learn that his parents die when he was young there too, and then he's raised by his grandmother, this beautiful, loving, caring grandmother. She does an amazing job of raising him, but she's about to lose her house. And so he needs to come up with money to save her house. Now, if it just started off that, he was this ice hockey player who was playing golf, who had this amazing drive, then we don't have that same context and meaning to it. We're unable to relate to the main character. We're unable to really know why they're doing what they're doing and why it's important. Now, when you're wanting to share your story, the reason there are a few elements, and we're going to talk about the elements inside it, but in essence, what your story is doing is it's telling your patients and your potential patients who you are, where did you come from, and why do you do what you do? Okay, let me go over those things again. Who are you? Where did you come from? And why do you do what you do? Now, a good creation or origin story needs to have a few ingredients into it. It needs to have a villain of some kind, okay? Without a villain, an obstacle to which to overcome there as well, the story lacks interest, and again, it lacks context and meaning. Now, the important thing for most of us in our background stories, thank goodness, our parents weren't murdered by some incredible wizard. We didn't exit into an alley and watch our parents be slain in front of us from a mugger. The villain doesn't need to be a person. It can be part of the system. So for many of us as chiropractors, when we're telling our story in terms of why we chose to become the type of chiropractor that we became, we're telling a story about the fight against big pharma or traditional health care, or maybe it was a health challenge that we overcame that I'll tell a little bit of a story in a moment about my sister there. The villain was an illness that we had. So when you're thinking about it and you're looking back over your backstory there too, think about what was the obstacle that you had to overcome. Now, another really important ingredient is that there needs to be consequences of you not getting past that villain. If, for instance, in Harry Potter's case, had he not been able to kill Voldemort, then Voldemort would have taken over the world. It would have become evil. He would have killed all muggles, that's us as normal people, and all mudbloods. those are those witches and or wizards that happen to be just kind of born in there, that they came from normal parents, so to speak. So that was the consequence. If Batman was fighting against evil, he wanted to make sure that all of Gotham didn't kind of go down the drain. So what were the consequences for you in your life if you had not overcome those challenges? That's a really important thing as well. Now, your origin story doesn't need to necessarily begin at the very beginning of your life. So let me give you an example. For me, I became a chiropractor for no inspiring reason at all. I was a 17-year-old trying to decide what to do. And who knows what to do as a 17-year-old? I had no idea. Chiropractic sounded like a good idea. At that stage, I'd had a few visits to a chiropractor, and God bless him, but he wasn't the most inspiring character in the world. And I knew that chiropractic kind of helped me with my backaches and pains, but that was about it. That's the reason that my family visited a chiropractor. So there's no real inspiring reason there. However, when I was in my final year of studying chiropractic, my older sister, Melanie, hurt her back. And so I said, you should go and see a chiropractor. And there's a great guy at the student clinic. Neil was his name, amazing chiropractor. You should go along and see Neil and he'll be able to help you. Now, Melanie had grown up struggling with a kidney disease called glomerulonephritis. And she was one of those really sick kids, could never put on weight, was often, someone would get a cough and a cold, Melanie would get it twice as bad. And we didn't really know what was going on with her for a long time until we found out that she had glomerulonephritis. So this meant that Melanie would bleed regularly into her urine. Now, you can have a lot of blood in your urine and not even kind of know it's there. But Melanie's would get to the stage her kidneys were functioning so poorly that she would be bleeding into her urine, and she could see it, like visually her urine would have a tinge of red to it. And it was expected that at some stage that Melanie would need a kidney transplant, and the best match would be someone in her family, and that was quite possibly going to be me. Now, the whole time this was going on, I didn't know that this had any relationship to chiropractic at all. So Melanie hurts her back and she goes in and she has an adjustment with Neil. And her back feels a little bit better, but she noticed later on that day that there doesn't seem to be that same tinge of red in her urine. She thinks maybe this is a consequence because it's not like it's always red there in her urine. She goes back and sees Neil again, has another adjustment, and same thing happens. And she notices as she continues her chiropractic care that her urine samples, so every now and then one of the things that Melanie has to do is kind of keep her wee for a week. Imagine keeping all of your wee and then looking at kind of inflow rates and outflow rates and measuring kidney efficiency. Melanie had another one of these kidney efficiency tests not long after she kind of hurt her back, after she'd been getting adjusted for a little while, and her numbers were best that they'd ever been. Now, long story short, chiropractic care, Melanie right now, when she turns 50 next year, she still has her kidneys. I still have both of mine too. But that's a story that I tell and have told many times in different versions, short versions. We'll talk about the length of them. But this is the story that really inspired me, helped me be who I am as a chiropractor. There are many of them, but that's one that I often tell because it's a great story. It's someone very close to me. So many of you might be thinking, wow, Angus, I kind of got into chiropractic for no inspiring reasons, but was there a patient early on that you saw something happen that really inspired you? Was there a book that you read? Was there a seminar that you went along to? Often what we can do is that we can borrow from other people's stories. Now, there's an important element here too, because your story does need to be true. So Melanie is my sister. All of that did actually happen. I've kind of compressed it a little bit in terms of time frames through there. We didn't quite realize what was happening quite as clearly as I articulate it to now. But it is part of a story. That means that in some ways when we're watching movies too, when we say that this movie is based around real events, but some of the characters' names and details have been changed for story. I think that's okay. I think as long as you're not completely making things up and, I think basically that. So it's okay for you to add some theatre and some story to it for the purpose of better relating with your clients. But again, let me just state this, it's important that there be pretty much based on truth there as well. You need to have multiple different lengths of your story. So you need to be able to tell your story in 30 seconds sometimes. You definitely need to be able to tell a 2 or 3 minute version, a bit like I did with Melanie's story there. And then also I think it's important for you to probably have a longer 10-minute plus story as well. And you'll need these depending on the circumstances on which you're telling them. So where and when should you be telling your story? Well, basically you should be telling it all the time and in pretty much every circumstance. So there should be a version of your story on your website. Now, video is a great way to tell it because we'd much rather watch a video than read it. But in your About Me section is a good spot for you to tell your story. One of my clients, Rob Rudy, recently told his story in a great video where he went through why he became the chiropractor that he did, the important elements along the way. And we can focus because there are also different parts of your story that you might want to share depending on the audience. So I have a story that I just told you in terms of now why I'm a chiropractor. And I will tell that when I'm talking to people about chiropractic. But if I'm in another environment and I'm talking to, for instance, health practitioners, a bunch of chiropractors, about why it is that I'm teaching marketing, then I tell another story. I tell the story of how in the first decade of my practice, I built a really thriving practice. We were seeing consistently well over 400 a week, mid 400s. And that the practice was built on really two things. We would do a monthly screening out in the community, so a spinal screening, and I would do a weekly spinal healthcare class. So once a month we would go out to the community, a fair, to the local shopping centre, mall, and we would end up with anywhere between maybe 50 to 80 new patients. And so that gave us a great inflow of new business into our practice. And then I would run a weekly education class where I would tell people the story of chiropractic, of how it could not only help them but their family and why they should bring their spouse in and their children in also. We would talk about the benefits of chiropractic beyond just the resolution of symptoms. And so that really helped me with my retention and my conversion and my internal referrals. And so this built a really thriving practice and also allowed me to have a really thriving lifestyle as well. I had a beautiful lifestyle. We were making great money. But what started to happen, and I noticed this, about years 8, 9, and 10 into my practice, is that the spinal screenings we're doing, whilst we'd get anywhere between 50 and 80 at them, it started to be 40 to 50, 30 to 40. And then sometimes we would spend a whole weekend and get 20. And then we would spend a whole day and get 5 or 6. And so we still had good internal referrals, but that big kind of dump of new patients, that started to really decrease. Now, along with that, what I also noticed is it was much harder to get patients to come along to my weekly spinal care class. They were being trained by this modern society that things were on demand. And when I said you needed to be at my practice Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, they were used to be able to stream movies, watch them whenever they wanted. There was Netflix starting to come on there, that everything was being trained to be kind of on demand. And it was getting more and more difficult. They were asking me, can I watch this elsewhere? Can you record it? Can you do these other things there too? And so there was a real shift. And at that stage, what I started to do was I wanted to start to study new and different ways for me to be able to bring new patients in. I had built a lifestyle where I thought I could probably step back from all the hours that I'd put in over the first decade and enjoy some of the successes. But the tap that had watered my practice, so to speak, was being turned off. And that's where I started to study marketing. I spent tens of thousands. In fact, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'll sometimes tell the story of, we spent $75,000 on an advertising campaign and got 7 new patients from it. So I tell that story there, and I go into more details of the failures, the consequences. In that situation there, the villain was really me not being able to enjoy my family. It was a circumstance in around that too. The villain was, I also tell how, traditional marketing, stuff that was sleazy and pushy, I make that part of the villain. So we want to have multiple different stories. If you're, for instance, talking to an audience that might be a pediatric-based audience, then you might want to have a backstory that talks about particularly why you and children. But then if you're talking over to a bunch of athletes, then maybe you've got a backstory that is relatable to them. So you need to, and you want to have multiple different versions of your story that you share in multiple different places. So one of those stories should absolutely be on your website. You should be hopefully have a welcome email that goes out to your patients or a welcome series of emails. And somewhere inside of that would be where you would want to share your story of, hey, listen, people often ask me, why am I so damn excited about chiropractic? Why am I perhaps even obsessed about it there too? I want to share a little bit of my background story. Now, we love hearing stories. The brain is primed for stories. It's one of those things that's been going on for millennia. And the moment that we hear a story, our filters are dropped down and we listen, and we often listen with our heart. We listen emotionally because the emotional connection goes in. So it's a great way to connect with people. Most of us don't like to be taught things. We don't like to learn because it's hard work for our brain, but we love to hear stories. And so we can sneak in a lot of information and a lot of learning and a lot of teaching through stories. So welcome emails is a great spot for it. In social media, you could be making a short video where you share your story. Hey, listen, many of you are new to me, and I want to share a little bit around why am I so passionate about being a chiropractor? Why do I think that it's essential that every man, woman and child, children in particular, should be checked by a chiropractor? And then you would tell your story there too. You should be telling your story regularly to your patients face to face. There will be moments inside somebody's first group of adjustments. I like to get it inside of the first half a dozen adjustments where I start to share parts of it. I was chatting with Dan Sullivan recently, and he used to share part of his story in the initial consultation. Let me tell you why I'm here now and why I'm so passionate about this. So he would share it in the initial consultation. Maybe you want to share part of it in the report of findings. You should be sharing your story whenever you're giving a presentation. So if you're invited out to community groups, and hopefully that's one of the things that you're doing, then you should be sharing your story there. But basically, you want to be sharing your story everywhere, and you need to be sharing it again and again and again. I'm a huge Tony Robbins fan and have done a lot of his seminars and bought a lot of his products, books, you name it too. And he is constantly in each of those sharing his background story. It must, to some extent, he must be a little bit sick. It's like, every time the Rolling Stones go and play a concert, they want to play Start Me Up. That's the album, that's the song we want to hear there too. They must get sick of it, but it's what the audience wants. And so you need to be telling your story so often that it almost feels like, I've got to tell it again. Surely people won't be interested. But they will be. And even there are many times, like Tony Robbins, for instance, I've heard his story so many times, but I still love to listen to the struggles that he had growing up, the villains that he had, the obstacles he had to overcome. And when I hear that he can overcome those obstacles, it gives me confidence that I can overcome them as well. So, in essence, a story and your background story is an essential part of your marketing arsenal. It's something that you should be telling in all different formats, short versions, long versions, middle versions. You should be doing it in your videos, in the written word, in email, and you should be doing it face to face. The story, in essence, lets your community know who you are, where did you come from, and what you do. A good story has a villain as a part of it, and it has consequences. The consequences for Melanie, if she didn't get over her kidney problem, was a kidney transplant, and that might have meant that I might have had to give one of my kidneys to Melanie. Now, I would have happily done that as her brother, but I'm thrilled that she's got both of her kidneys, and I'm thrilled that I've got both of mine. The consequences of me not being able to find a marketing solution for my practice would have been, 10 years of hard work slowly going down the drain, and I would have had to continue working lots of hours in the practice and not spend time with my wife and my children. That were the consequences that were a part of it there also, okay? So start to think about it. It might take some time for you to find what your story is. Some of you will know immediately what it is. Others, and there are elements of my story, particularly when I'm talking about marketing, that's taken me some real time to look back. What were the ingredients that kind of built to it from there? If you want a hand with your origin or creation story, reach out to me on the socials. I can help you craft it. If you're not quite sure that this should be part of it or not, then again, many of you get my emails. Respond to one of those emails. I'd love to help you with your creation story. I think you'll find when you start to share your story, it'll be something that will inspire people in your community. It'll be something that will connect you with people in your community, and it will help to fill your appointment book. Gang, until next time, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Your community needs you. They really, really do. I look forward to seeing you back here real soon. Bye. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at adiomedia.com/join. That's adiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.